When we breathe, our whole body expands. You know when you watch a baby breathing and you just see their whole body moves on the in-breath and gives on the out-breath? It's almost like as if we had a whole barrel. If our trunk was a whole barrel here. That whole barrel would expand when we breathe. So that if I show you with my ribs, I put my hands here on my ribs, you can see when I breathe in, if you watch my hands here, you'll see that when I breathe in, those ribs really expand. Now, in the other segment when we were talking about the head, neck, back pattern, we really didn't mention the whole widening of the back, but that's a lot that goes on with our breathing, and it goes on all the time. Even without our breathing, our back widens, but when you breathe in, that whole back really expands, especially these ribs here. And if you watch my hips here, even my hips expand on the in-breath. Watch this and you'll see even my hips will expand when I breathe in. See that expansiveness of the hips when I breathe in? And again, when I breathe out, they give. And when I breathe in, they expand. And now our ribs, we have these 24 different bones of our ribs. It's not just 12 ribs. We have 24 different bones, and they all have a little tiny bit of individual freedom from each other. And some move more than others. And they move almost like waves in the ocean. You know, when you have waves in the ocean, you might have a couple of big waves, and then maybe a little series of some smaller waves, or maybe fast in a succession, a wave and another wave, or maybe there's a wave and then it's a little bit of a while in another wave. But there's always motion. Just like in the ocean, there's always motion. With our ribs, there's always motion with our breathing. When you breathe, there's no way we can actually suck in air, take in air purposely through our nose or our mouth. Really, it has a lot to do with just expanding our body. Air comes in because there's a vacuum. So you can't sniff in air through your nose. If your mouth is closed and your body expands, you have a vacuum, air will just come right in. Nor can we gasp in air through our throat like that. Air comes in just because our body expands. And in fact, when we do that gasping of our throat, you can probably see when I do that, if you watch this area here, you can see when I gasp in, you'll see this pull in a little bit.
Yes.
See that pull in?
Mm-hmm.
When I try and gasp in air, what I'm actually doing is narrowing my trachea into my esophagus a little bit to feel like I get more air. There's a narrower space, and so I can feel the air pressure more, and I think, boy, I'm getting a big breath of air. But actually, if I just let that whole barrel expand, air comes in. Or if I close my lips gently and let that whole barrel expand, air just comes in and I won't even feel it coming in. I'll just be full of air. I have my friend here named after F.M. Alexander. I actually call him M.T. Alexander. M.T. because he's pretty empty there. So when I was talking to you about how often we try and pull in air through our nose or our mouth, we kind of try and take a deep breath by feeling the air go through our nose or feeling the air go through our throat. What we're actually doing when we feel the air go through our nose like that, we're actually tightening, narrowing our nasal passages to feel the pressure of the air against them, so we're getting less air, but we feel it more. And when we're gasping in through our throat, we're doing the same thing. We're tightening our throat, narrowing the air passage so that we feel like we're getting more air in, when actually all we need to do is create more space in our body, a low pressure area by more expanded space. This flat area is going to be the tendon of the diaphragm, not the contractile muscle part, the tendon. And the pleats are going to be the muscles. And now if we look on the other side of this, we have that here. We're going to pretend this flat area, that we could take this flat area out of here, and we're going to take the stuffing out. So we've got a little kind of hollow area underneath here. And we've still got these pleats being the muscles. We're going to have these pleats on this hollow area here. We're going to have those pleats as if they're attached all along the edge, the bottom edge of the rib cage here. So that's where those pleats are going to be attached there, even a little bit to the lumbar spine here. And we have this little strap here that we're going to pretend is the part attached to the lumbar spine. And what happens when if the pleats are the muscles, when those muscles contract, they're going to contract both ways. They're going to the part that's attached here to the edge of the ribs, is going to bring those ribs up and out a little bit. It's going to widen them a little bit up and out. At the same time, the part here that's attached to this flat tendon area, it's not really flat in ourselves, it has a little bit more dome up and some spaces for things to go through. But here the muscle part, the pleats attached to this tendon area, when they contract this way, they're actually going to flatten this out a little bit. If I were to pull this way, that would flatten this out a little bit. It doesn't flatten it out completely in ourselves, but it flattens it out a bit. So in us, what happens when we breathe, the ribs and little muscles between the ribs, a lot like our abdominal, like little sets of abdominal muscles almost, actually release the ribs out and gather them a little bit together. And then when we breathe out, the ribs just hang on the spine, even at the same time that whole spine lengthens. But for the diaphragm to be able to do this nice contraction very, very easily, what actually has to happen, I'm going to put the diaphragm down for now. We'll pretend that diaphragm was just the perfect size for this guy here, for MT here. So here what has to happen for that to be able to very easily move down and expand the ribs is that all our organs in here have to be able to be moved out of the way a little bit. The diaphragm has to displace our organs a little bit. They have to be displaced because they're not going to get squished. They've got to move a little bit when the diaphragm comes down. And here on the right side we have our liver, this big about 4 pound liver here, and over here we have our stomach, and then all our intestines and other internal organs. So what happens when we talk about that whole barrel expanding is this whole area here really expands to allow the organs to be displaced. It releases, it expands, so that it's nothing for the diaphragm to just go ahead, and it's a contraction. It won't feel like a contraction to us, but it's a contraction of the muscles, and the diaphragm goes down, and our lungs are sitting. We'll bring this diaphragm back up. Our lungs are sitting glued to this part here. They're just glued to this. They're stuck to this, and so when this contracts and that goes down, these bags, these sort of almost plastic bags, not plastic, but kind of spongy bags of lungs, they just go down with it, and then they create a vacuum and air just comes in. If our nose or mouth is open, air just comes in. And what happens here with our pelvis is really interesting, because here we can even have our organs, as you notice with the hips, when the hips expanded, we can even have room here for all our organs to expand. And what happens, and you'll see back here, this guy is not so flexible, but our tailbone here, which is jointed onto this triangular bone of the sacrum, when we breathe in, our tailbone will actually widen a little bit back and out at this joint here. And then when we breathe out, it'll give back in. And when we breathe in, it'll widen a little back and out. Much easier than you see me having to move this stiff guy here with my thumb. It'll happen very easily. This will just release like this. And even the bottom of the hip bones here will expand apart from each other a little bit on the in-breath. This will all expand. So our whole pelvis expands on the in-breath. And here our abdominal muscles expand to let the whole front of us expand, and here muscles in our back expand, our ribs expand, our whole trunk all around expands for that in-breath to make it easy for the diaphragm to contract and take in air. When you let your neck release and your head floats a little bit forward enough and your whole back widens and lengthens, that creates the space, the freedom, and the muscle tone to just have air easily come in.